So, let's talk about color palettes today. In this video, I want to show you three ways through which I create my color palettes for my illustrations and then draw this illustration on Procreate using one of these methods. So, let's get started. So, one of the easiest ways of creating a color palette is to use the color picker on Procreate. So let me show you how I use that. So first I want to click on this wrench icon here on Procreate and to add a photo from which we will generate a color palette. So I really love this photo of a folk um, embroidery pattern that I want to choose the colors from. And now I'm just going to pick the colors from this and create a color palette. You can also create your own color palette using the color icon on the extreme top right side on Procreate and mix and match primary colors and secondary colors to create a harmonious color palette. So now I will create a separate layer where I will create a color palette in from this photo, and then I'll go in and select the colors that I want to pick from the photo to create my color palette. Right now, as you can see, I'm selecting all the colors that I see here, um, but eventually I will remove or add a few more colors to create my own color palette. So I think I'm I'm okay with finishing off and I'm happy with this color palette. And then I'm going to turn off this photo layer and then add or remove more colors to make this into my own color palette, but you can also keep it as it is. So this is one of the ways of creating a color palette on Procreate. You can also use the same method of creating a color palette on a different app like Adobe Fresco if you use that. So another way of creating a color palette is Canva color palette generator. You can just Google Canva color palette generator and this will come up. You don't really need to sign up to create a color palette in this. You can simply create a color palette by just uploading an image, and unless you want to really save a color palette in your account, then you can probably sign up. So I'm going to upload an image and see how it generates a color palette. So I've chosen an image from my photo gallery and it has instantly generated this color palette. Canva is a good way of generating color palettes if the photo that you're picking colors from has more saturated colors. If the image doesn't really have saturated colors, then it won't show you the exact colors. For example, let me show you another example of this. In this image, it is not really showing the right pastel shades of the photo. So for an image like this, I would recommend using the color picker method and use Canva for more saturated colors. Another way of creating a color palette is this website called coolers.co. It's also available as an app, but I have only used it on my laptop or like on a web page on my iPad. It's one of the good color palette generators which has an option to create a color palette from an image and also by picking and matching colors. So here I have started the generator and it has already generated a color palette for me. On a laptop or a computer, you can press space to change the color palette, but on an iPad, I will just press this generate button and see how it creates different pre-generated color palettes. Now, the best part about this generator is its ability to mix and match colors. And one of the great features is that you can lock a certain color. For example, if you have locked these colors, then it will only generate the rest of the unlocked colors and not change the locked colors. So you can try different color combinations. Another great thing about this app is that if you're working with a graphic designer, then it can generate the hex numbers in a PDF form for each color. So this PDF can then be given to a graphic designer, or if you are the graphic designer, you can use it in your projects which you make in Adobe Illustrator. You can also swap the colors as well in this and see how different colors match with each other. You can also copy a certain color to the clipboard and also kind of change the gradation of certain colors. The more you play with this app, the more variety of ways you will find to truly utilize it to build a variety of color palettes. So I highly recommend that you try this app. You can use it on your laptop, you can use it on your iPad, but this is definitely one of the good ways of creating a color palette. So this is a drawing that I made a few days ago, and let's try to create a color palette for this using one of the methods that we discussed earlier. So for this I'm planning to use Canva to generate a color palette. I'm going to choose a random image from Pinterest for this and then create a color palette on Canva from that, and then use that color palette to make this illustration. So let's get started. So as you can see, I'm on Pinterest and I usually like making a color palette from building photographs or even photographs of outfits. So I really like this one as well. And then let's scroll down a bit and check out more images. I like such pastel shades. So I'm just going to put in the color palette that I created on Canva and I'm going to start drawing. So at this point I'm happy with this color palette, but I might add a shade of yellow to it because I do want a color which pops and makes my illustration look a little more brighter instead of just pastely. So let's get started. So once I put in this color palette from Canva, I usually also create my own color palette just by selecting these colors so that I can mix and match or add any colors that I want to add or change up any colors in here as well. So I'm doing just that, and now I'm just going to remove that layer or just close that layer off and start adding more colors which I want to add. So I'm also thinking of adding other colors like skin tones or hair colors to this. As you can see, I've also added the yellow color that I was talking about. So I'm going to now reduce the opacity, and then on another layer I'm going to start coloring the illustration. I always usually start with a skin tone first, and here I'm using the dry ink pencil because it gives a good texture do with the drawing in general. After drawing the skin tones, I usually then start coloring the other colors, especially the clothes or the hair. If you observe here, I am not really focusing on perfection, and it's absolutely fine. You can go at the end and then uh, detail out every portion. But when I start a drawing, I don't try to achieve perfection in coloring. I usually just color and enjoy the process. So there are different ways of drawing hair. I usually love drawing hair with a lot of detail. So this is the final illustration. I hope this video was useful to you. Please consider subscribing if you like this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.